We don't believe. And perhaps sometimes we should. Thomas didn't believe until he saw, and so often in our own lives, we don't believe until we see. We hear something on the radio, or somebody tells us something through the grapevine. I don't believe that. It may be true, it may not be true. But we want verification. It's part of our human nature. We like verification. We like news stories verified. Every once in a while there is one that's verified. But we are all doubting Thomases to some degree, in some fashion in our life. I guess you could say Thomas was a realist. He'd been hurt and he'd been disappointed. He had expected a whole lot from Jesus, and then to watch him die like a common criminal, well, that was just too much for Thomas to bear. You know, when you put all of your faith into something, faith in terms of humanness, not faith in God, but when you put your trust, let's say, into something, and then that something falls apart, you are, what's the old saying, once burned, twice shy. The next opportunity comes around, you're a little bit shy. You don't want to believe. In order to believe, you have to metaphorically put your fingers in the nail holes and your hand in his side. Thomas had his hopes about Jesus shattered once, and now he was going to be extra careful before he said he believed anything. He didn't want to set himself up for another letdown. Has that ever happened to anybody in their life? You're setting yourself up, you got these expectations, and then all of a sudden the carpet is proverbially pulled out from under your feet. It hurts. It does not feel good. Have you ever had moments of doubt like Thomas? If you haven't, you're a very exceptional person. Some of you may remember the name Dave Dravecki. It was quite a few years ago, but he was a pitcher. He lost one of his arms to cancer. His career was obviously cut short. It was a tough time for him. It was a tough time for his family. But during that time, he received many letters from fans. Most of them were supportive and letters that one would appreciate getting. But one day he got a letter that said, "If there is a God who loves you, why did he allow you to lose your arm?" You've asked a similar question about a loved one. God, why did you allow this to happen? I've lived for 41 years, and I have yet to see any piece of evidence that there is anything real about weakling, or about any religious belief. Religion is nothing but a crutch used by weaklings who can't face reality. And the church is nothing but a bunch of hypocrites who really care nothing for one another, and whose faith is nothing more than a bunch of empty phrases they spout off to impress others. Somebody was mad. That's a pretty strong indictment of the church and of people who attend church. How would you really, and in fellowship time, talk about this, or with your spouse, how would you respond to a letter like that? Now, it's a lot easier to just say, well, I wouldn't respond, I'll throw it away. It doesn't deserve a response. But I say questions do deserve a response and a statement. If you believe, can you imagine if we believed as strongly the opposite as this person who wrote that letter? Because he obviously that's a strong feeling. But Dave Dravecki did not allow that to upset him. In his career, he had faced many doubts. But his faith had made all the difference, he says. And he continued to share his faith with others. He says, anytime we come to God, it is an act of faith. When we knock on heaven's door, no matter how hard or how long or how angrily or how stubbornly, We are saying by our very presence at the door that we believe God is there. We believe that God has an influence on what takes place in God's creation. You know, struggling with doubts in your faith is nothing new. For centuries, we've struggled, ever since we've had the not named Christian. The early Christians had just as much difficulty as we do. Sometimes these periods of doubt lead us to a deeper and a greater understanding of our own faith. So about a week after Jesus had appeared to the disciples, he came to them again, and this time Thomas was with him. Jesus said to him, "Put your finger here and see my hand. Reach out and put your hand here in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." And then Thomas made one of the greatest confessions recorded in the Bible, when he said, "My Lord and my God." And from that day on, Thomas would be risking his life proclaiming the gospel that he once doubted. Jesus told the apostles, however, that there is a better way of coming to faith. It is in hearing and believing. Jesus said that from now on, faith would not be transmitted through earthquakes or through bank deposits or even by a personal visit from the resurrected Christ. Faith would come by one person sharing with another what the gospel has meant to him or her in their lives. Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have faith. From that moment on, people would depend on the witness of previous generations and the personal testimony of those whose lives have been transformed by the power of the Holy Spirit. Jesus' words were spoken not only for the disciples back then, but those words are for us today. We are invited to continually hear and read the gospel message and then to share that with others. That is part of our mission. Anytime you share by giving food or coins or help in some way, you are sharing. You're doing a live act of the gospel. It doesn't have to necessarily be with words.